What's going on, everyone? Thanks so much for tuning in to another episode of the Ducks Dish podcast. I'm your host, Max Torres with ScoopDuck on 3, coming to you live on Tuesday, May 6th, 2025. Thanks for being here. Glad to have you guys along for another edition of the Oregon Recruiting Hour here on the Ducks Dish podcast. The question today that we will be tackling and kind of unwinding: when will the Ducks skid end on the recruiting trail? Of course, it's been a couple of tough misses in the 2026 class here. And joining me to break it all down is ScoopDuck owner and publisher Justin Hopkins. J-Hop, how are you?
Good. It's Taco Tuesday, which is on the heels of Cinco de Mayo. And so, if you like Mexican food, this has been the couple days for you guys. But and I do. So margaritas are great. So, but yeah, I'm good. Ready to talk through some of this. I guess we can call this the recruiting hour, the recruiting therapy hour.
Yeah, I think Oregon fans probably find themselves in need of some therapy after some of the misses and tough news that they've gotten on the recruiting trail in the last 3-4 days. So we'll have plenty to talk about here on the pod. We are live streaming this episode on the ScoopDuck on 3 YouTube channel. So if you guys are watching us on YouTube, do us a quick favor and hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Help us continue growing our YouTube community here with ScoopDuck, and maybe pop in the comments and let us know how you're feeling about Dan Lanning and the Ducks recruiting efforts here in the 2026 class. Because I know if people are anything like what we have on ScoopDuck, Justin, they are going to want to voice kind of how they're feeling on things. So let's hop right in. I think we start with the biggest development that wasn't much of a shock, but I think is still kind of where we need to kick things off here on today's episode. 5-star quarterback Jared Curtis recommits to the Georgia Bulldogs on Monday afternoon, choosing Georgia over Oregon from his final 2. And this obviously comes after he had named Oregon his leader at one point during his recruiting process. He was out to Oregon for a couple of visits since he decommitted from Georgia, but ultimately he opted to call Athens home for his college career.
Yeah, I think the recommitment trend is something that's become a little bit more, popular. I don't know if I want to say popular, but it's become more common for sure. So, to me, as far as Curtis recommitting to Georgia, that used to be a thing. That used to be very rare, and it's just happening more and more. And I think in this particular case, Curtis handled his recruitment the right way. A lot of people are like, well, why did you decommit in the first place? Just to waste our time. No, he did it the right way. He approached Georgia and said, look, I committed early. There's still some other visits I'd like to take, and I'd like to take them openly. I don't want to be committed anywhere. And so he went through the process. And you can't fault the kid for, hey, I'm going to make sure. I want to go check out Oregon. I want to check out Bama. I think he checked out Ohio State, South Carolina. There was a handful of schools he went and checked out. Obviously, Oregon made the biggest push, for Curtis and Georgia, and that relationship with Georgia went back several years, and Oregon didn't quite have that long-standing of a relationship. And I think I would say this, regardless of all that, if the Jared Curtis decision was kind of like the only one that Oregon missed on, I don't think Duck fans would be that upset or that surprised. Him going back to Georgia, where I warned all along distance was going to be a hurdle. Even when he was calling Oregon the leader, I said, just pump, be excited. That's fine. But just wait, distance is going to be a problem here. And I think ultimately that's what it was in the end. So what I was trying to say, and I got sidetracked on my own, is I think just the Jared Curtis recommitting to Georgia, I think if that happened any other time and it was maybe just the one loss that Oregon had on the recruiting trail, I don't think fans would be that upset or too surprised. But because it's been yet another building block in the absolute beatdown session Oregon's taken this spring, it's kind of like I don't know if I want to call it an implosion, but it was definitely, a lot more gas on the fire that was already building up there.
And Will Stein went out there to Nashville to do an in-home with Curtis ahead of his commitment. And that was really kind of Oregon's last chance to make their pitch right there with Georgia, obviously, and Mike Bobo. He was also in home to go see the coveted passer. But like on the surface, Justin, I think you and I both agree, like Oregon pulling out a 5-star quarterback away from a major SEC team in SEC country. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's just not the most likely of outcomes that we've seen. I mean, the last quarterback that I can think of that they got from out there, if we're taking Bo Nix out of the situation, obviously because he was a transfer, was Tanner Bailey in the 2022 class, I want to say, and he was part of Mario Cristobal's recruiting efforts at Oregon. So him going to Georgia, it stings, yeah, but we always knew that Oregon was going after Jared Curtis and Ryder Lyons, the Folsom quarterback out west, who I'm sure we're going to talk a whole lot about in this opening section of the show. So it's certainly not a we didn't want him anyway. I mean, if you watch that tape, that dude is a stud of a quarterback. I think he also has a pretty good ability to run with the ball that it maybe doesn't get talked about too much. But it's kind of business as usual as far as Georgia and an SEC team getting a top flight quarterback. Kirby Smart is probably looking to bounce back a little bit, if you even want to call it that. I've been listening to a lot of college football shows this offseason, in a down year for the Bulldogs was still winning the SEC title. So I don't think they're going away anytime soon. And now, as we kind of expected all along, as this one kind of continued to trend towards Georgia, Oregon's going all in on Ryder Lyons.
Yeah, I think again, like I said, this was a lot more gasoline on a fire that was already burning pretty well. And I think the hard part is because obviously, as we know, we're about a week away from Jackson Cantwell, 5-star offense tech, making his decision. And so a lot of folks, myself included, do see that these recruitments could be tied together. So it's not just, hey, we lost Jared Curtis. That seems to be another notch in the belt for Georgia with Jackson Cantwell potentially next week. They're not a package deal. That's not a guaranteed thing, but it's very understandable to see the two linked and think, oh, Oregon or Georgia, whoever got Curtis, that probably helped them with Cantwell. So now you feel like, okay, maybe that helps Georgia with Cantwell as well. We don't know that decision. There haven't really been any crystal ball picks flowing in. There's been a couple here and there, but so we'll see. But, I think that's another big part of it. And like you said, we should credit Oregon because they're going to pivot from a 5-star quarterback to another 5-star quarterback that, has basically kind of said Oregon's been the leader or a top school at times in Ryder Lyons. That kid's really good. Obviously his mission withstanding, that's a kid that you'd love to get on your roster too if you're Oregon. So it's not, we didn't want him anyway. And it's not like, oh, woe is me, now we have to settle for Ryder Lyons. Like, you're still very lucky if you're the program that gets to sign Ryder Lyons, regardless of his mission. So we'll see how that plays out. And that's one thing I think folks need to credit this staff for. There's almost always a contingency plan in place at nearly every spot they're recruiting. And that contingency plan is typically another top 50 or 5-star or top 100 level player. It's not like, oh, we missed out on Jared Curtis. Now we're going to go get the 3-star from Idaho that nobody's ever heard of. That's not what's happening here. They do a really good job planning for this stuff, doing a lot of going for the best. And then when they have to settle, it's also usually for somebody who's pretty elite. And that's the case here with Ryder Lyons.
Yeah, so let's just kind of unpack this a little bit more here, Justin. We obviously know that Jonas Williams committed to Oregon. I believe it was in the fall, and we all know how that one went. They had him in the boat, and it was a verbal commitment, so nothing binding, of course. And the staff continued to recruit Jared Curtis, Ryder Lyons. And even when Jared Curtis announced his top 2 and we got a decision date and all these things, I was kind of waiting the entire month of April, or I guess just keeping an eye out to see if Oregon was going to go after another 2026 quarterback. Maybe somebody new we hadn't heard too much about. Maybe it was someone committed to another school, but they didn't do that. They just kind of stood pat and kind of kept their head down and kept doing their thing. And now it seems like they are one of obviously the favorites to land Ryder Lyons. I had my pick on USC back in the fall. I'm not sure I'm going to be sticking on that one, seeing that Jonas Williams has since committed to USC. and Oregon's right in the thick of it here for Ryder Lyons. We know that I think it was Will Stein and a couple of the other Oregon coaches hit the road and went out to Northern California to Folsom to see Ryder Lyons in the last week or so during the spring evaluation period. And now we have Oregon battling the likes of USC, BYU, and Ole Miss as well. I think they're another school that's worth mentioning in this race. But it seems like Oregon's picking up some steam with Lions, and I know you were one of a few that put your RPM in for Oregon to land Lions.
Yeah, I did, and I put it in immediately after Jared Curtis, and there's a making his commitment to Georgia, and there's a grand conspiracy that I knew all along that he was going to Georgia, and that that's not how these things work anymore, guys. It's a totally different ball game than recruiting used to be 3 or 4 years ago. I was prepared for Jared Curtis to go to Georgia. We were also prepared for Jared Curtis to come to Oregon just in case, because we had a story saved in case he made that decision. Obviously, we didn't need to use it. But to me, the reason that happened, bang, bang, and the reason I did that is because I felt all along Oregon would not miss out on both Jared Curtis and Ryder Lyons. I didn't think they would miss out on both. Okay. And I do think that Jared Curtis and all the noise with Oregon has been a big reason why Ryder Lyons might not have already committed to Oregon in this case. I think maybe the two sides kind of played it that way. I think with the path clear, I think Ryder Lyons has always really liked Oregon, loves Will Stein, loves the offense. And I think now if you're Oregon, you're obviously making the sell that you would be our quarterback in this class. And I think that's going to appeal. So, I mean, all these things lined up, it's making educated guesses at this point. And again, Oregon missed on Jared Curtis, and I just don't feel like Oregon will miss out on Jared Curtis and Ryder Lyons. So that's why I made those picks pretty consecutively. That's why I had a story saved. I might have just had to hit delete on that story because Oregon could have ended up with Jared Curtis. But as you and I know, and people at On3 knew, it was looking like Georgia. It felt like if we were placing our hard-earned money down on the table in Vegas on Georgia or Oregon for Jared Curtis, we were going to put it on the Georgia circle. And that's how it played out. Nobody knew for sure. He had 2 videos made. It just felt like that was the smart money, and it ended up being the smart money in that case.
And just to dive in a little bit more here to Oregon's chances, kind of like what I was saying with Georgia getting an elite quarterback from SEC country, we kind of expect that at this point. It's not a surprise. So along a similar line of thinking with Ryder Lyons, well, who makes more sense for Oregon to land, the 5-star from Tennessee or a 5-star from California, from the West Coast, Oregon's bread and butter, where they've historically done really well? Ryder Lyons is easily the answer here, and I think that, I mean, I'm right there in kind of your frame of thinking with, I don't think Oregon's going to walk away empty-handed at quarterback in the 2026 class. It doesn't add up. That's not how this staff operates, and they've poured a lot of time and effort into recruiting Lyons. So I think that he is probably the guy that you're looking at. I don't even know who I would tell you if you asked me what other 2026 quarterback do you think Oregon is either in the mix with or would really heavily pursue if Ryder Lyons were to commit elsewhere. I'd have to do some digging. I'd have to do some research and kind of make some calls and see who are maybe worth kind of keeping an eye on. So the last thing I want to say here with Lyons and just the quarterback picture, Justin, we know about the mission trip. That's obviously his plan. That's well publicized at this point, but it sounds like it's going to be probably a shorter mission trip than your traditional 2 years that you see with people of the LDS faith. So he's a de facto 2027 recruit. He's not going to be able to see the field until 2027, wherever he goes. And if we just want to operate off of him potentially going to Oregon, he may not be a guy that we see on the field right away in Eugene. But if I'm this Oregon staff, I think that I feel comfortable going all in on Ryder Lyons because this quarterback room is so talented and so healthy right now. You got Dante Moore. Does he play 1 year and go to the NFL? Does he play 2 years then go to the NFL? We don't know. Then you also have Austin Novosad, Luke Moga, and then now the young gun, Achilles Smith Jr., who just got there. And I think that was one of the big takeaways from the spring game. Granted, it was just a spring game, but that room looks healthy, and you can see why JKS got to Oregon and then quickly decided that he wanted to go to Cal and try his hand there.
Yeah, there's so many moving parts at quarterback. And we got to look at this as basically like a 2-year projection here. So yeah, obviously we know it's Dante Moore, Austin Novus had this year that leads the team. Both of those players have the capability to come back for a second year, and either it might be one of their first years leading the team or one of their second years leading the team. We don't know. We have no idea what that's going to look like. And worst case, they both leave, and you're not confident in Achilles Smith Jr. or Luke Moga. And I'm just saying whatever. I'm not saying that's the case. You go in the transfer portal. The transfer portal is abundant for 1-year quarterbacks, really good quarterbacks that are proven, that you know what you're getting and you can win with. To me, quarterback, I'm just not concerned about it at the prep level. I'm just not. Getting Jared Curtis would have been great. Getting Ryder Lyons would be great. If Oregon missed on both, the only thing that it really impacts to me negatively is Oregon's ranking. You're basically going to cost yourself a 5-star potentially on your ranking. And instead of being maybe number 3 overall, you're number 4 or 5 overall because you don't have that. That's it. I don't care. Look at what Oregon did with the last 2 transfers that showed up, and probably going to do with the third one in Dante Moore that showed up. So I'm okay with that. Totally different story at offensive tackle. Okay. And that's, again, we're seeing contingencies in place. We see Oregon in the mix for 4 elite offensive tackles. Ihenicho, Cantwell, Obot, obviously Green, flipped and committed to UW. Who knows if that's done or not, but you're looking at those 4 guys. Oregon's not going to miss on all 4 of those guys. They've got contingencies in place there. They might miss on Cantwell. Okay. I don't think they'll miss on Cantwell and Ihenicho. I think they'll get one of the 2. I just don't think they'll miss on both. And furthermore, I feel like they're probably going to end up with one of Obot and Green along with whoever they get there. So all those contingencies in place are great. For me, if at the end of the day we're in December and we look back at this list and Oregon's missed on 3 of those 4 offensive tackles, but has signed a quarterback, whatever, Ryder Lyons, I would gladly trade that quarterback for one of those elite offensive tackles. That's just the way I see it. And again, that's if I was in charge of the team and managing the team. So I'm not. Dan is. Marshall is. I'll leave those decisions up to them. But I just, some of this stuff doesn't get me worked up in the panic room like, oh my God, we missed on Jared Curtis. Yeah, you did. And it's tough. And he's going to Georgia, and it is what it is. Might end up with Ryder Lyons. Might end up with a transfer guy. I'm fine either way. Just go get me a couple offensive tackles, please.
Yeah, and that's why, for me, Justin, it's like if you had to choose, you can get a commitment from Curtis or Cantwell. I'm going with that tackle for sure, because looking at Oregon's quarterback room, I would think that Cantwell is a guy that you're probably going to get on the field sooner. And he's obviously coming off the board on May 13th. So a week from today, as we're streaming this, as we're recording this here. And Oregon does have other options at offensive tackle. You got into some of them there. And I think another thing that we can just talk about for a second, or I guess is just worth mentioning, Oregon's done a hell of a job with quarterbacks and with offensive linemen under Dan Lanning. You saw both Dylan Gabriel, both Bo Nix, Heisman Trophy finalists. I know there's already people out there now saying those guys were from the portal. They weren't developed at Oregon. Well, I think you can make a really good case for Bo Nix being developed at Oregon, because his career, I wouldn't want to say it was going off the rails at Auburn, but it was night and day difference what was going on at Auburn versus what was going on in Eugene. And then Dylan Gabriel, I think, is a different situation because he was only with the Ducks for 1 year. But if you just want to take development out for a little bit, Oregon has a good quarterback just about every year. That's been the case since Kenny Dillingham was there, and now Will Stein's there. And I think they're still going to have great quarterbacks. And then Malik Terry's been just crushing it with the offensive line since he's gotten there. And I think getting a guy like Cantwell or a Iheanacho really helps you kind of get away from the transfer portal a little bit. We know they had to get some guys there this cycle in the portal. And the staff wants to have high school guys be the nucleus, be the foundation of any roster. And on the heels of the Curtis news, and then we're looking ahead to Cantwell's commitment, Oregon's coaching staff was on the road on Monday out in Baltimore to go see Emmanuel and kind of check in with him, and just keep doing their thing, keep chopping wood, like you're saying. And I've heard over the last month or so, maybe I'd say the last couple of weeks, that it seems like Oregon's kind of turning up the heat with Emmanuel. And I think that makes a lot of sense. I think you probably agree that Cantwell looks like he's trending Georgia right now.
Well, I mean, it's no coincidence. Again, I've never felt like you were going to get Cantwell and Ihenacho in the same class. As much as that would be awesome, and I'd love to see it, I just don't think it's realistic. So, I think as you saw Cantwell start to trending to Miami, and then it was Georgia, now Georgia too. In that same time frame, you saw Ihenacho basically start trending back to Oregon and naming Oregon the leader. And so those two things are tied together. They have to be. And so that's just looking at this the right way. So I do think that Oregon's going to end up with one of the two. I think right now, if you ask me, it looks more favorable to beat Ihenacho. But I am not counting Oregon out for Cantwell either. That's a guy they've poured a lot of resources into. They're not out. Oregon is definitely not out of it for Cantwell. He made that visit to the spring game for a reason. Obviously, still see something that he likes in Oregon. Of course, he's going to visit Georgia as well, which makes things really interesting or dangerous there. But don't give up on either one. If Oregon ends up with either the number 1 ranked or the number 2 ranked offensive tackle in this class, that's a pretty damn good day. And to me, the development thing is overblown. It's basically a narrative created by opposing fan bases that have nothing else to pick at about Oregon, right? I mean, outside of Oregon not having a football national championship, that's about all they have. I mean, Oregon's winning games. They've won big games. Dan Lanning can recruit. Clearly, they're putting guys in the NFL. So it's really just a narrative of opposing fan bases. I don't buy into the development thing anymore because I just don't think recruits are seeing that as an issue for Oregon and Dan Lanning.
And further aiding Oregon's just development pitch is all the guys they're sending to the NFL. So, I mean, some of those are transfers. Of course, that's the case at almost all these other schools now as well, because it's just kind of adapt or die with the portal. And even Clemson's Dabo Swinney's coming around and taking some guys from the transfer portal. Every school is going to do it. But I think where you have some room for some criticism or some more discussion is how heavily do you lean into the transfer portal and how many of your guys are you keeping around? And that's obviously part of a larger discussion. I'm right there with you, Justin. I'm not counting Oregon out for Cantwell, but right now I don't think they would be my pick. And it certainly seems like things are in a bit of a better spot with Emmanuel. Let's talk about another one of the kind of tough misses on the trail for Oregon over the weekend, Justin. This happened while I was at the Under Armour Los Angeles camp at Mission Viejo over the weekend. That is 4-star modern-day wide receiver Caden Dixon-Wyatt chooses Ohio State over Oregon in, I don't know if I would call it a shock of a decision, but I know both you and I had our picks on Oregon to land Caden Dixon-Wyatt. You can't get them all right. I mean, I'm not going to sunshine pump or say anything crazy. I own it when it's not right. And I think if I learned one thing from that kind of fallout and all the conversations I had after, I mean, I have a hard time seeing myself picking Oregon for receivers that are considering Ohio State if Ohio State really wants them, because we just haven't seen it happen yet.
Yeah, I mean, there's like when Cantwell was favoring Miami, there's some programs that, like you look at it and you say, okay, gosh, a wide receiver picked Ohio State. Really? Like, yeah, really. I mean, that makes total sense, right? I mean, it's the same if Cantwell would have ended up at Miami when he was trending that way. It's like, yeah, it's Miami and maybe they're not winning as much, but I mean, he's still going to get great offensive line coaching. I can't totally fault him. So some of these things, to me make sense. KDW going to Ohio State. I felt like Oregon was in a better spot there. Obviously he picked Ohio State, as we both know. Everybody knows now. I just don't fault him for it. It's not like he went and picked a random school and it doesn't make any sense. It's Ohio State, and Brian Hartline's still there. And he's also got his teammate that's committed there, and Chris Henry Jr. So maybe those guys are saying, hey, let's keep it together and team up. And, I think I think the Chris Henry Jr. recommitment or whatever, the reaffirming his commitment, probably played a role in that decision as well. So this one to me, Caden Dixon Wyatt, out of like all the losses or the misses or whatever, this one doesn't move the needle too much for me. I think Derek Coleman-Brusa going to UW moves the needle a little bit more to me. I don't think that one's done, but it moves the needle a little more to me than KDW or Cody Green going to UW. Tom going to USC. All those move the needle a little bit more for me. I don't want to. I'm not panicking. Everybody knows that, but they register on my alarm a little bit more than KDW going to Ohio State. So, I think I can live with this one, and I think Oregon will be okay at wide receiver. And there's a lot of time left. I think I posted in my story today that there's 212 days to December 4th, which is the early signing day. 212 days in recruiting is a lifetime. There will be thousands of commitments and decommitments around the country in 212 days. So I'm not saying anyone in particular. It's going to happen though.
Yeah, and we're not even into, well, I guess we're starting official visit season. I've talked about it, I think last week, that it's just officials are starting earlier and earlier, it feels like, which is a bit of a shock, but there's still plenty of time here. Football still needs to be played. I mean, that's part of kind of what the responses I'm getting are when I kind of ask internally about, hey, what's going on there in Eugene and how are you feeling about just everything recruiting wise? It's like, well, you still got to play football, and winning solves everything, which is maybe not quite as true in today's NIL era, but it certainly doesn't hurt you. And I know that Oregon's going to be using that to their advantage as a recruiting tool on the trail here. Well, let's talk a little bit more about
on the heels of that, just real quick. Nobody internally is panicking. Are they aware of how this looks? Absolutely. Are they aware that maybe they haven't closed on some of these guys like they hoped for? Absolutely. But nobody is panicking in Eugene, Oregon on May 6th. I assure you of that. They are aware, and that's all you can ask for. They know how this looks, and they know how Duck fans feel, and they know what it looks like, but they also know what they're going to be able to do this summer, which is when Dan typically strikes. And, there's I wrote a content item on ScoopDuck that outlines, hey, here's why you guys just need to give it a little bit more time. Here's why. A lot of history there to suggest Oregon's going to be just fine.
Yeah, I think it's going to be just fine. I mean, I'm still expecting Oregon to have a top class come December. Maybe I'm a little bit less confident that it's a top 5 shoe-in right now with how things have gone, but there's still so much time for Oregon to make up ground and get some really key pieces in the fold here in the 2026 class. We want to hit on some live questions before we get out of here, Justin. So if you guys have any more questions, maybe throw them in the chat and we'll try to get to some of them here. This one comes from Mark Henley, who asks, does Ryder Lyons commit to Oregon or does he go with USC just so it doesn't look like he was waiting on the Curtis decision? I'll hop into this one first. I mean, I don't think that Ryder he hasn't set a commitment date, so we don't even know when he's making his decision. I think that if you were to ask him if his decision is tied with any other quarterback, he would say no. He's confident in his abilities and that he can go out there and compete anywhere. And USC already has a quarterback in Jonas Williams in the 2026 class. I'm not saying that's the only reason I think Oregon has a great shot with Ryder Lyons, but you just don't very often see a school assign 2 top quarterbacks of this caliber. Oregon looked like they were going to do it in 2025, and then it didn't happen. That lasted all of about a week, maybe, with Achilles Smith Jr. and JKS, but I don't think that he was waiting for Curtis's decision, and he's gonna make his own call.
Yeah, I don't think he's going to let that change his decision. He'll either end up at Oregon or USC because of fit, and all those things and comfort and all that stuff. He's not really tuned into this. I just think it gives Oregon a better chance because obviously they're going to sell, hey, you're our 26 guy. Obviously, they've already got Jonas Williams. He won't be taking a mission. It might make things a little more difficult for Ryder Lyons when he comes back. But I don't think to the specific question that, no, this will change the outcome of his decision simply because Curtis didn't end up at Oregon. Excuse me. Yeah.
So there's these are QB dominoes, Justin, right? And I said it earlier and I wrote about it on ScoopDuck. I have a hard time thinking that Oregon's going to walk away from this class empty-handed in its search for a top shelf signal caller, and Ryder Lyons is certainly that. We got a couple more on Ryder, but we'll just go ahead and try to hit them here. Jackson says, how do you think Ryder's brother being at USC affects his decision? I mean, I think it plays into it a little bit. Who doesn't want to play with their brother, play with family? We've seen that be part of the decision-making process in the past, but the transfer portal is there. I mean, if what if his brother doesn't want to be there? He can leave at any time, just like any other player on the roster. So I don't put a whole lot of stock into his brother Walker being at USC and that being a crucial part of his decision-making process.
Simply put, I think it's one of the best things USC has going for it with Ryder Lyons. I think if his brother Walker wasn't there, I think this guy might be a Duck already. But it's certainly a factor. You're asking me how much it affects his decision. It's certainly among those things. And this is yet another recruitment that I don't think comes down to strictly NIL. Jared Curtis was not strictly an NIL recruitment, and I don't believe Ryder Lyons is either. So now it's just up both of these coaching staffs to kind of make their pitch. And also don't discount BYU. They're making a really strong push as well.
Yeah, BYU's certainly in the mix heavily there with Ryder Lyons. And then Ole Miss is another one that I've kind of been told to keep an eye out for in that Ryder Lyons recruitment. Got one more on Ryder Lyons, and then I think we'll mix in some other non-Ryder Lyons questions. But hey, he's the hot topic today with quarterback recruiting being the main focus right now. This question comes from Eric, who asks, what is the timeline for Ryder Lyons to commit? And is there any real smoke with Keyshawn Henderson? For folks who don't know, Keyshawn Henderson is a 2026 quarterback out of the Houston area, committed to Houston, just superb athlete, does a little bit of everything, but is primarily being looked at by most schools, I would think, as a quarterback. I haven't heard any smoke with Keyshawn Henderson. I mean, we do know that he holds an Oregon offer. We know that Will Stein is a Texas guy, and he has great connections there. Rashad Sample's another guy from the Lone Star State. Drew Maringer, I could go on here. But as far as Ryder Lyons, he hasn't announced a timeline. But at the same time, I don't know. Like, you just kind of have to expect the unexpected. Anything could happen. He could commit tomorrow. He could commit during the summer. He could take it all the way to the wire before the signing period. But maybe we see him take some OVs. That's kind of my guess right now. I don't think he's going to be rushed into a decision. Any school that he's considering would certainly, I think, keep a spot for him. You're not going to turn away Ryder Lyons. At least I wouldn't if I was a coach. So that's kind of my best guess right now.
Yeah, the Curtis decision is basically fresh in his mind. So I'm sure he's kind of letting that marinate for a little bit. And, we'll talk to his family and his coaches, and we'll get some clarity on some of these things. Because I'm going to guess he wasn't quite ready to make a decision right now. So I think if you're Ryder Lyons, you take this week and digest, all the news, and there are other quarterback dominoes that are kind of trending, and just start to think about that question for yourself. If I had to make a guess on what he'll do, I think he'll take a couple of official visits as early as possible, maybe by the end of this month. Oregon, USC, BYU, maybe Ole Miss, just to a few, and probably get this thing wrapped up fairly quick, because it is getting a little later in the calendar year for a quarterback. As far as Keyshawn Henderson, Texas and others have tried. He really likes Houston. He's committed there. He's been committed there. He's a great player. Right now, I think your word that says smoke is probably one thing. If Ryder Lyons goes ahead and makes a decision here in the next 3 or 4 weeks, which is totally possible, I don't think Keyshawn Henderson even enters the mix at all. And even if he did and visited Oregon, I still think he's going to be a tough pull, even if that did happen.
Yeah, I'm on the same page there. I got a question from Andrew, and then we'll do one more for today. Andrew's a frequent listener and viewer, so thanks for being here, Andrew. We always like having you part of the show. Are there any wide receivers still on Oregon's board? Have they given up after KDW? I think a couple names that are worth watching on Oregon's wide receiver board. You got Jalen Lott out of the state of Texas. I currently think that he's probably leaning towards Texas just with how many times he's gotten out to UT over there in Austin. But I do know that he visited Oregon earlier this year, and that Oregon's battling there. I think that you also have to say Messiah Hampton out of the state of New York. That's kind of Ross Douglas's guy this cycle, given that he was at Syracuse and they have a relationship that goes back quite a ways. And then Calvin Russell out of the state of Florida. I think he's kind of my dark horse for Oregon in this class. He was on campus in the spring, and it sounds like he might get back there for an official visit. And unless Caden Dixon-Wyatt shuts down his recruitment, I don't expect Ross Douglas or the rest of this staff to go away.
I mean, they're not giving up on KDW. They're not going to give up on Chris Henry Jr. Lawton Hampton seem like the best two picks right now to end up in this class for Oregon. Both really good players. Messiah Hampton's been a steady riser, really good player. And like you said, Calvin Russell did recently visit. I think you can keep an eye out there for now, but seems like a little bit of a long shot at the moment.
Yeah, so we're on the same page there, but those are some of the names to keep an eye on. Question from William McBride, who asks, outside of Wesley and Benjamin, who are we in a good spot for? Richard Wesley, of course, the elite edge rusher out of Sierra Canyon here in Southern California, recently reclassified from 2027 to 26. And then Davon Benjamin out of Oaks Christian. He's a really talented DB that this staff certainly covets. I think Messiah Hampton is certainly a guy that we would probably put in this tier, Justin, of Oregon being in a good spot for. I think Brandon Arrington is another one. I'm not predicting either of those guys to Oregon, but it seems like the Ducks are trying to turn up the heat on Arrington, who just took his first official visit to Penn State. I think Jax Tanner is another to watch for out of the state of Ohio on the offensive line. And I think those are probably the main ones that I would say right now. I think Nick Abrams is another guy that I wouldn't write off, even though he's all the way out in the DMV.
You got Tommy Toffee. You've got Jet Washington. Jalen Lott, I think, is still a guy that Oregon is in a great shape for. Emmanuel Ahenacho recently called Oregon his leader, so you've got to feel good there. Kelvin Obot put Oregon in his top 5. I mean, they're in great shape for a lot of really, really good football players. And I think I wrote something like 25 of the top 100 players Oregon is like a real threat for. Even if they went 30% there and got 8 or 9 of those guys, that still, with Kendra Harrison and some of the others they have committed, puts them at an elite level class. So Oregon's going to be fine. I know it feels like a bunch of misses. I still think some of these guys that committed elsewhere are not set to be written off just yet. Let's kind of see where they work. But you and I just rambled off like 10 names right there, and I think every one of those guys was a 4-star or better, other than Jax Tanner.
Yeah, so there's still a long way to go. Oregon's in on a lot of guys. I think just my final piece on the premise of this show is just, when will the skid end for Oregon? I think I would probably say sometime in the summer is a good idea. That way we'll get through official visit season, and a lot of these guys want to make commitments before their senior season start in the fall in August, around that time. So I think Oregon's going to be just fine. I admit that it's been rough lately and it's not looking great right now, but Oregon's still a heck of a program. They're going to win a lot of games this year, and there's still going to be a whole lot of people that want to play at Oregon.
Well, there's 2 things to that from me, and this will be my final thought as well. The last 2 years, out of the 50-ish, whatever the number is, guys that Oregon signed at the prep level, not transfers, just prep level guys, out of those 50-ish guys from the last 2 full classes that finished number 3 and number 4 in the rankings, only 1 committed in the month of April, and only 2 committed in the month of May. Everyone else came after that. So I want you to let that sink in a little bit. I basically said 3 guys out of 50, so 47, whatever the number is, something like that, came after the month of May. Okay, we're on May 6th. So I think it's fair, if we look at that history, to stay patient and say, okay, we're getting near the end of this nightmare. Don't get me wrong. I'm calling it a nightmare. I'm with you. But you got to just not sit there and panic and talk about firing Dan Lanning and Marshall Malco and saying they forgot how to recruit, and Phil Knight's ran out of money, even though he's got a net worth of $30 billion. Oregon's going to be fine. Secondly, and also really important, okay, Oregon is in a different position now than they were these last 2 cycles. Okay, they just won the Big Ten Conference Championship. They went 13-0. People see they win football games, beat Ohio State, big win. Obviously, got their ass kicked by Ohio State too, but still, you could say you beat Ohio State. Oregon is in a different position now because this roster has a lot of really good young talent. It takes NIL to keep that talent on your roster. Okay, it's no longer like, hey, we have a bigger surplus over here. Let's go get more transfers and fill these weak spots. There aren't that many weak spots on the roster. They still need to recruit and continue to recruit and keep it stockpiled, but there is a little bigger allocation now to the team because they want to keep that talent there. So just kind of understand Oregon doesn't need to go sign 30 guys. Okay. They need to sign 20 of the right guys, of really good players, and then put them with those other good players. So your expectations need to be a little bit different this year because of the progress of the program. So take the deep breath. Like I said, out of 50-ish guys, only 3 of them that signed were committed. And none of them were 5 stars. Not a single one of them was a 5-star. I think Aaron Flowers was the highest rated one, and he was a 4-star safety. I think that's the only one. No 5 stars. So yeah, be patient. That's a little research for you guys.
It's super important to keep the context of everything. Look at history. What has history shown us? Look at where the Ducks are at on the field and with NFL draft production, the stability on the coaching staff. I think that all plays into the equation here. Justin, we got over 1,100 people here in the live stream. So really, really love the turnout and appreciate everyone tuning in. If you guys are here, like I said earlier, make sure you subscribe to the channel and come and see us at ScoopDuck.com. You can try us out for a week for just $1. We got a lot of great stuff going on over there, and I think it's going to be another exciting season for the Ducks on the field. And, Justin and I are going to have you guys covered with all the wild twists and turns on the recruiting trail. You want to find more of Justin, follow him at JHopkinsSD. Find me anywhere at Torres Sports. And do us a favor and share the show with another Duck fan. But until next time, thank you guys so much for tuning in to another episode of the Ducks Dish Podcast.